but actually we're going to start from the beginning, which is actually saying public servants, we can use that resource in a much better way.
So are you going to restructure Te Pukenga? Is that what you're saying?
Well, as we have looked at it, that would be an example of something that we think is not working currently and has been an unmitigated disaster for the last 6 years.
At what point do you consider the sunk cost and you say, well, look, this money's being spent, it actually isn't economic to peel things back? I mean, at which point do you say that? Because that's an example.
Our starting point is always the outcome and the delivery. And so we will start there as to what delivers us the result and the outcome, and then we'll work the means out by which we deliver.
But what about the consultants needed to undo the Māori Health Authority, for example?
Well, we think we've got a lot of people sitting in our healthcare system, as you can see today. It's already spending $100 million in health already around consultants. We believe that we can run that much better through using public servants. There will be a need for some consultants. What Simeon's saying is we're going to have a 25% reduction in contractors and consultants. That takes $400 million off the table. We think we can do that incredibly well. And we've also, remember, we've added 14,000 more public servants in the last 4.5 years. So there is plenty of resource to do it. But this idea that we just throw more public servants at it, and we also hire more contractors, and we also hire more consultants, and actually we don't deliver better outcomes, better frontline outcomes for people, that's stopping.
All right, so if you were taking $400 million from the $1.7 billion consultant spend for this policy, how are you going to pay for readjusting the tax thresholds?
I'll let Nicola talk to that. Yep.
Well, we've consistently said that we will be delivering more value for spending across government. We will set out the funding of all of our commitments in our fiscal plan prior to the election. What you've seen from us today is a really clear statement of our priorities. We want less money being spent by the government on centralised services, on waste, and we want more money going to New Zealanders' back pockets.
Why cap it at 180?
Look, I mean, 180 for us is where we think people will need to be able to deal with that on their own, and we cannot support them there. What we're really focusing on is saying, if you think about it, a nurse and a policeman, for example, household income that earns $135,000. The average income's about $70,000 in New Zealand, so it maxes out at 140 really, and then there's a taper off. So there's just not a cliff that fall off at 140. It's a taper off.
Because recently you were proposing the tax cut for people earning over 180, and now you're cutting off the support for a couple of 180.
We have to draw the line somewhere. What this delivers is 80% of families with children under 5, 130,000 families across New Zealand, and it's really targeted for both low and middle income earners. And when you think about an average family, as I said, with an average salary, good jobs, paying $300, earning $135,000 a year, to be able to get $75 back after tax is a really great win and a great boon for them.
Te Pukenga and Māori Health Authority areas that you've identified, but other agencies or any other places in government you would looking to restructure?
No, I mean we'll have more to say as we go closer to the election and unveil more policies.
Sorry,
but at this point, these are
no, you're not going to, or no, not yet.
We haven't. Those are the two that we've said that we want to do something about right now.
So you're saying no further restructuring, and you're
what our focus will be on is making sure that we get a public service that is delivering improved outcomes. And I just have to say, look, just take a step back and ask yourself what has actually happened here. We have literally got a government spending $1 billion more each and every single week. It has gone off and hired 14,000 more public servants in the space of 4.5 years. And it has let consultant spending go up to almost $2 billion a year.
Is there going to be restructuring elsewhere?
Those are questions that we'll deal with down the road. But what I'm saying to you right now is the two that we've talked about.
So you're keeping the option open?
Te Pukenga and the Māori Health Authority we've talked about in the past.
That option remains open for elsewhere in the public service?
That's not what we're here talking about today. What we're focusing on today is our Family Boost policy to give relief to working families.
How many households do you think?
Health NZ, are you happy that restructure is coming?
I don't know. I'm not party to those conversations. That's obviously something for the government to
do. But there are a lot of civil servants in that organisation. You said that.
What I'd just say on healthcare is that that is an organisation where we have an incredibly stressed out workforce, and what we need to do is get the money from the centre and from the bureaucracy out to the front line to improve health outcomes. It is not acceptable that in the last 5.5 years every single health outcome has gone backwards. We now have almost 30% of Kiwis waiting more than 6 hours to get access to an ED department. We have 40,000 Kiwis almost waiting more than 4 months to get their first surgery appointment or their first specialist appointment. Those are things that have really delivered very poor outcomes over the period of time. So the focus is internal. It's about building bureaucracy. We're seeing the same thing happen with Te Pukenga. We're seeing the same thing happen with healthcare. We're seeing the same thing that will happen with Three Waters under the government. So for us, it's a philosophical difference. We do not believe in centralisation and control. We believe in getting money out of the bureaucracy in the centre out to the front line to deliver improved outcomes, because that is what it is all about.
You're still using 2018 PISA figures to criticise Chris Ifkin's record on education. Is that fair, given most of the time that would capture international education?
Yeah, well, look, I have to say, for a minister who has spent $5 billion more on education, to have added 1,400 more public servants into the Ministry of Education, and to deliver the lowest levels of regular school attendance that we've seen, and rapidly slipping academic achievement, that just doesn't work. You have to be outcomes focused and generated. That's the only thing that matters. Have we got more attendance? Have we got better academic achievement or not? But to spend more, hire more, and deliver worse is just abysmally poor.
How many households are you expecting to be affected by this policy?
There'll be 130,000 families. That's about 80% of all families with children who have kids under the age of 5.
What is your position on Te Pukenga in terms of what you would do with it? Would you unravel it?
I'm not going to get into that today. Penny Simmons is doing the thinking around that, and we'll have more to say when we launch our full education
Would
policy.
you expect it to get more expensive?
How much is Gabrielle's damage sort of cause National to rethink their priorities when it comes to policy, and how much they're going to be willing to spend, considering the damage from Gabrielle's sort of cited to be in millions?
I'll let Nicola talk to that. Yeah.
Well, obviously, the rebuild from Cyclone Gabrielle has to be a priority, and what that requires from us is that we make good investments in infrastructure for the future, but also in terms of repairs. We think it underscores the need for the government to do some reprioritisation. For example, we would not be recommitting to a light rail project in Auckland with a price tag of $30 billion, when those resources should be focused on our regional connections, which are clearly under pressure. So for us, it underscores the need for careful sequencing and prioritisation of infrastructure projects, and ensuring that we put together budgets that put the dollars into the things that count. But can I just also say, when it comes to infrastructure, it's not just about the size of the cheque you write, it's about actually getting things built. And when I look at COVID, where we had the announcement of the shovel-ready infrastructure projects, 225 projects were announced, only 49 have been completed. So this is not a government with a great track record on infrastructure. And we'd simply point to National's track record. After the Canterbury earthquakes, we did borrow, we rebuilt, we paid that debt down.
Back on the households, will you expect that sort of more households would put their children into childcare with, getting a rebate like this? And how much is that going to end up costing? Yeah,
look, we've factored some of that there might be more growth. I mean, the great thing here is it also just gives families more choices. So for partners being able to get back into the workforce when we have lots of job shortages and opportunities is a good thing. If families choose to want to be able to work longer hours, that they can, knowing that they've got some more support there, I think is important. So for us, it's all about choice. But yes, certainly we've looked at levels of growth, and we're very comfortable with that.
Is this a feminist policy?
Well, it's actually a policy about saying we know that there are working families in New Zealand doing it incredibly tough. When you have got a fixed mortgage at 2 or 3%, and then all of a sudden it jumps to 6 or 7%, you're talking about $400, $500, $600, $700, $800 extra a fortnight you have to find. And so we know that these families are doing it tough. And what better way to fund this than to say, I'm sorry, but we are cutting waste out of Wellington to do it.
Obviously this is going to be welcome to people, struggling. Childcare is a big cost. But taking a step back, isn't there a risk here that you make families and individuals just more and more reliant on the state? You take working for families, you take childcare subsidies. Is that actually masking the true economic situation? And I include wages in that. And it becomes more difficult to actually make people more independent. No,
look, I think this is actually recognising that we've got families who are in good jobs and on average incomes that are doing it just incredibly tough. And at the same time, we've got a government that's got no economic management, and doing a very poor job of it, and driving huge amounts of waste and churn. And what we want to do is take that money, because as I've said to you before, you can get different outcomes with the same dollar depending upon how you lead and manage it. And what we're doing clearly here is taking the money and saying we can give it a much better outcome by actually getting it to the families who desperately
How
need
about a
it.
message to employers to actually increase wages so that we have a high wage economy with the underlying economic conditions that need to happen? But what pressure should be on people paying the wages instead of really being topped up by subsidies
Well,
underneath?
this is the fundamental issue that we've been talking about now for, Nicola and I, for over 16 months. We started talking about it from week one when we became the new leadership team. And we've been focused to say, look, this is a government that has not been managing or fighting inflation appropriately. There's been nothing changed in the economic plan or
but
management.
on the other side, wages.
But sorry, so the way you deal with that is that you have to get to the causes of inflation. And we know what they are from economic history. You have to stop passing costs on to businesses that lead to higher prices. You have to free up particularly our immigration settings so that companies can get productive growth and actually drive to higher margins and therefore drive and support higher wages. You have to make sure that you're really disciplined on the government spending, provide people tax relief through just inflation adjusting the thresholds so they don't get caught in higher bracket creep, and get that Reserve Bank focus on a single
Is
charge.
really going to help push wages up
Well,
in New Zealand?
well, let me be really clear. I mean, there are many businesses up and down New Zealand that are not maximising their revenues or their profitability because they haven't been able to access workers. We haven't been able to access workers, we haven't been able to pick fruit and vegetables, and as a result we've got high prices. So that's where immigration actually helps drive productivity into an economy like ours and helps maximise each of those individual companies to be able to do much better than they are.
Just on childcare, if you're expecting an increase in demand on childcare, early childcare is already a sector in crisis. There are wait lists up the wazoo for it. How much money are you going to pour into childcare so that you can actually meet the requirements of increased demand?
Well, for us, this policy today is all about making sure we get relief to the parents, the families that are doing, the working families. We're not changing anything about the funding of childcare. It's additional to all the other benefits and entitlements that people have, and we'll have more to say about that later on in the year.
Are you going to increase the funding to early childcare?
We know that in the future we need to deal with the underlying cost structure in early childhood education. We'll have more to say about that in the future.
Why not focus on that now? Isn't this going to lead to fees going up 25% by, getting these rebates?
No, it won't, because essentially the ECE market is a really competitive market, and so parents have a choice of providers, and that's the first thing. The second thing is that the money is being paid directly into the parent's bank account every fortnight by the IRD, and as a result, early childhood centres don't have visibility to salaries and to wages as a result. So we're really confident that actually, this is going to be well received, well supported by parents and working families who are doing incredibly tough, trying to pay mortgages, deal with rent, rising food, rising clothes costs, dentists and plumber appointments that come out of the blue, those sorts of things.
If family's going to be getting an extra $75 a week, isn't that going to be inflationary?
Oh, no.
No, it won't be inflationary because we're not increasing government spending to fund this policy. We're directly funding it by cutting waste out of government spending. But also, as the leader said, we have a very competitive early childhood education system in New Zealand. And I think early childhood education providers will know that if they try and pump up fees, they will lose families. This is a policy that will make a real difference. There will be families for whom this means that mum takes a promotion because suddenly she can make the sums add up when it comes to the increased early childhood costs. For some families, this will mean that instead of getting to the end of the week and not having any money left, they will.
Why did you put this policy over an annual 1 year rather than over a standard 4-year budget process, and will you inflation adjust the parameters of it as time goes on?
Well, because we wanted to be very transparent about how the cutting of the consultancy funding on an annual basis would then allow for the annual funding of the early childhood increase in the rebate. So that annual swap is really clear, and that's the way that we've presented it today. As we go into the future, our commitment for our first term is that the rebate will remain at the levels we've set up.
Why did you choose to use this policy rather than, say, give a larger tax cut for low to middle income earners, for example, which would, perhaps have been what the National Party might have done in the past?
Well, look, for us, this is about recognising that there are working families, who have good jobs and average incomes, as well as low-income workers that are doing it incredibly tough. And what we want is something substantive. We want to be able to deliver this childcare tax rebate to them, because we know that they've got huge costs and huge expenses. This is, I think, the best way to be able to do it, and to be able to do it by saying we're going to cut $400 million worth of waste. We're going to cut and cap it for our first term, and make sure that we actually generate those savings that can fund this program. I think it's smart.
But a bigger tax cut for low to middle income earners, allowing them to spend their own money and decide what to do with it, they would have been more consistent with
this is what that is. This is what that is, because what we are doing is targeting a particular group of families who we think are really feeling it in the cost of living crisis, who face high housing costs and high costs to work in the form of childcare, and we're letting them hang on to more of their own money. They are taxpayers. When they go onto National's tax calculator, they will see that not only will they benefit from inflation adjustment of tax thresholds, but they will also benefit from a tax rebate.
How much is this going to cost to administer?
Look, our view is it doesn't cost much more to administer at all, because we already have these existing mechanisms. It's very similar to how working for families payments are made, essentially. So the processes are well established in the IRD.
Will IRD need some more public service?
I would just say to you, how many submitters
Last time I checked, they've already got 4,000
4,000
staff and a budget of around $750 million. I reckon they can make this work.
They can make this work.
Right, do you think it'll be hard to wean the public sector off its reliance on consultants? Because it is a bit of a global phenomenon, right? Outsourcing to these.
Yeah, well, what's got perverse in New Zealand over the last 5.5 years is, not only, you take the existing public service we had, you've added 14,000 more public servants, and then you've gone and increased consultant and contracting spending up to $1.7 billion a year. And it's become calcified and it's become embedded in our public service system. And that's the thing that we're sending a very clear message back to public servants to say, look, Simeon's, I've tasked Simeon, I can tell you really clearly, he and I've talked a lot about it, he knows what the goal has to be. He will cut and cap it and deliver that savings for us so that we can do this policy. And so I'm sending a message really clearly back into Central Wellington to say, look, this centralisation control agenda that's been going on with lots of public servants, lots of consultants, and poor outcomes. I'm only interested in outcomes. That's what we have to be obsessed about in New Zealand. That is the thing that makes the biggest difference to those to everyday New Zealanders going about their daily lives. And if we don't have a passion for actually saying we come to government to do public service, to do these jobs, to make life better for people, that's what it's about. That's what it has to be about. And so, that's what we want, is outcomes improved for New Zealanders. And so the message is really clear. You don't do that by putting bloated bureaucracy in place.
So a quarter of all consultants are going to lose their jobs.
Yeah, and I feel very good about that actually big partners at consulting firms up and down New Zealand, thank you very much, but your money is going away and we're giving it to hardworking families who deserve it and are struggling with the cost of living. On that note, happy to be in. Thanks so much. Thank you. See ya.
Yeah.
Smiling assassin. Smiling assassin back.
Yeah, you might.
Do you have another job at
Sorry, no idea. I've got nothing on my phone. Do you need to go back?